And it's one of those stories in the Old Testament that people read and go, huh? What in the world is this all about? And I would suggest to you that there is always a good reason why God decides to put something in the Bible. Ezekiel records a very strange sermon, perhaps the strangest sermon ever given. Ezekiel is instructed to preach to a valley of dry bones, and I think the symbolism is unmistakable, and perhaps just a tad uncomfortable for us, because it does sort of resemble us. By the way, you may need seatbelts for this one. Ezekiel 37, 1 through 14. And the hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and set me in the middle of a valley, and it was full of bones. And he led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. And he asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. And I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I prophesied, there was a noise, a rattling sound. And the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked, and tendons of flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of man, say to it, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life and stood upon their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up, our hope is gone, we are cut off. Therefore prophesy to them and say to them, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. My people, I'm going to open up your graves, and I'll bring you up out from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel, and then you, my people, will know that I am God. And when I open the graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle in you in your land. Then you will know I am the Lord has spoken, and I have done this, declares the Lord. As I said, a very unusual sermon. But I think Ezekiel would understand and recognize our day today, much like he did his time. This was written in the 5th year of King Jehoiakim, which is while Israel was in the captivity of Babylon. A very depressing time, if nothing else. And you will find that Jews and Christians alike use this story as a story of revival, of the need for revival. And I think, perhaps, we need that more now today than ever before. Because it is a promise from God that says He can and will produce revival. The truth of it is, my friends, today more than ever before in my lifetime, we are living in a valley of dry bones. Churches are everywhere are closing. Just think about, in your lifetime, how many church buildings used to stand and were filled that are now gone. Perhaps a vacant lot or just an empty building or repurposed. The same thing has been happening in Europe and in Britain. And we have Christians over there warning us, it's coming your way. But we largely ignored them. We sat really smugly thinking, oh, that can't happen here. And now, over the last 5 decades, we see it very much where the churches are just fading away. And rightfully so, many have asked, Is the age of the church over? Is it time for the church to just give up and die? Because it seems to be that's what's happening. I would argue that the day of the church is never going to be over in God's eyes. But I will say that we, the church, have forgotten our place. Instead of evangelism and sharing Christ's love, and by the way, Deb, I appreciate your sharing what you shared, because I think some of the greatest problems of our world today is because we, the church, have forgotten how to love. But we are to be the light and the salt to this world, and we fail to do so. Instead of that, we've become more committee-driven organizations that serve our own people, our own agendas, rather than God's. We perhaps spend more time caring for our buildings than for our fellow man. I told you this could get bumpy. I actually wrote this message, or a similar message to it, 15 years ago and delivered it at Bangor Liberty, because I feared that the church at that time was getting very complacent. And I think it was. I think, unfortunately, 15 years later, this message has become even more of an issue than it was then. The trend is becoming a more continuing thing. And in that 15 years, we have lost 10 churches from the Iowa Yearly Meeting that no longer exist. So perhaps there was a little bit of prophecy involved. Today, churches would prefer to stick to comfortable social issues, causes that look and feel good, but that don't really draw people's anger and lets us do church comfortably. There's a problem with that. It is not God's will. The comfortable church is an oxymoron. It never was comfortable. It was never meant to be. From day one, being with God meant people would attack you. You don't believe me? Ask the disciples. Ask Stephen. Ask Martin Luther. Ask George Fox. We have and always will be attacked by the world. And Luke 12:49 through 53, Jesus warns us of such. I came to cast a fire on this earth, would that it were already kindled. I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how great is my distress until it is accomplished. Do you think I have come to give peace on the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on in this house there will be 5 divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. The division Jesus is speaking about isn't just political or ideological, it is spiritual. People rejecting God, and by default, His church. These verses are often avoided because they are uncomfortable and, frankly, have been misinterpreted by many. The truth is, my friends, as Christians we are called to confront sin, first within ourselves and then in others. That will, unfortunately, I guarantee, bring problems. One reason these verses are avoided is because we want to read them selectively. I am more than happy to point out your sin, but I have no desire to examine my own. And Jesus knew that and understood it, and therefore gave us Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5. Judge not that you not be judged, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye and not notice the log in your own? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck from your eye, when there is a log in your own? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, then you will see clearly the speck of your brother's eye. I don't know about you, but I want to skip directly to getting that plank out of guy's eye, when in fact it's actually just a speck. And because of that, it will cause problems. It will create division, and it will keep us from honestly dealing with sin. But it is nothing like what Jesus is describing. The truth of my friends is that division is at some point inescapable. It will happen. It will be part of the church. The question is the division because people are rejecting God and His ways, or is it because I am obnoxiously looking for specks in other people's eyes without dealing for my own? At this point, you may be going, well, Rick, that's all well and fine, but what in the world does that have to do with these dry bones? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there is a point. Ezekiel is placed in a ridiculous situation, a valley of dry bones, probably a scene of a war where a great army or armies died. And he is asked, can these bones live? Now, I'm here to tell you, Ezekiel's a little bit smarter than I, because I would have looked at him and said, duh, they're dead. But Ezekiel wisely answered, you know, O God. Then God tells Ezekiel to preach to those bones. Again, I'm pretty sure I would have questioned God on that. But Ezekiel did not. This is why there is a book of Ezekiel in the Bible, and the book of Rick will never be in the Bible. As Ezekiel preached the bones, I don't know did I do that? Okay, as Ezekiel preached, the bones began to rattle and come together. And I've seen a lot of distractions during sermons, but nothing like that. Yet Ezekiel preached on. Much in the same way today, pastors have numerous distractions from preaching to the dry bones. The world is specific of this nation. To be honest with you, much of the world today is willingly or subconsciously in denial about their pending damnation. I will tell you that there are churches who will frankly tell you we will never speak of hell or damnation because we don't have that in our message. The problem is, Jesus spoke more about hell than he did about heaven. The reason it is important to speak about sin, about hell, is that we need people to understand you don't have to go there. You don't have to be there. We need someone to point that out. We need someone to share God's love that says, God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. We need people to preach the gospel. And at this point, many of you are probably sighing and going, oh, good, because that's what we have pastors for. That's their job. But I'm here to warn you that it is not just the exclusive job of Ezekiel, pastors, Sunday school teachers. It is the job of all Christians. They are all called, even those who are not comfortable with it. And unfortunately, you might need to cinch your seatbelt a little bit tighter because it's not over yet. There's a story of a man named Mr. Lipkowitz who was approaching 85 years of age and decided it was time to give up his apartment in New York and move to Miami. He was given a name of a Florida realtor who enthusiastically drove her to Miami, extolling the virtues of every apartment they looked at. She said, at this one, what a steal. The investment of a lifetime. Why, 10 years, it's going to be worth 3 times as much. Sonny, Mr. Lipkowitz interrupted, at my age, I don't even buy green bananas. As Christians, we should be a little bit more like Mr. Lipkowitz. I need to realize my days are numbered, and so are those of all those around me. Being wrong for a lifetime is horrible, but being wrong for an eternity is unimaginable. we need to first examine ourselves. Are we Christians by association? My church, my committees, my ministries? Or are we Christians because Christ came into our lives and now rules as my one and only Lord? You may ask, how can I tell the difference? Well, it actually is pretty easy. Ask yourself, how many decisions do you make without prayer? If the answer is most, then you're not operating as Christ called you. How often do I ask in a decision, will this glorify God? If the answer is rarely, again, you may not be following Christ as closely as you should. And finally, is there a burden on my heart for those destined to hell? And do I look how I can do to change that? Yep, I promised you a bumpy ride. It's still bumpy. It's not bumpy because it just describes a few of us. It's bumpy because at some point, we all fall into this category. That's the bad news. The good news is we don't have to stay there. There's a story of a minister waiting in line to get his car filled with gas on a long holiday weekend. The attendant working quickly. That's me, I think. I think I moved my arm. But the attendant was trying to do it as quickly, and he says, Reverend, I'm sorry about the delay. It seems that everyone waits till the last minute to get ready for a long trip. The minister chuckled. I know what you mean. It's the same in my business. The truth of it is, my friends, the question is, are we waiting in line in a valley of dry bones? I've been there. In fact, I spent most of my Christian life there. I cannot and I will not stand up and point fingers at other people because I was guilty of this far more than many of you. But I have come to a point where I realize that I cannot comfortably stay there. And I certainly can't comfort others in our guilt. I believe it is a time to challenge each other to start rattling our bones. The fact of the matter is, Ezekiel preached to a bunch of bones, and we are called to do the same. That is the day we're living in. For our nation, for our world, for our church. You are either the dry bones or the one called to preach to them. There is no third position. Which one are you? The good news is that God promises us that His word never returns empty. If we address those dry bones around us, there can and there will be revival. We live in a time of absolute depression, of things that we seem to think cannot go right. But God says He still is sitting on His throne. We have an ability to share good news to this world. And that good news can and will change. Only if we're willing to preach. But some of you are saying, I'm sorry, but I ain't a preacher. That's your job. And I understand. Not everybody wants to get up in front of a pulpit. I understand that. But St. Francis of Assisi said something about preach the gospel at all times. And when necessary, actually use words. My friends, you are preaching a sermon every day of your life, whether you realize it or not, whether you intend to or not. The question is, what sermon are you preaching? When you talk, you can say things that you may not mean. But I assure you, my friends, that as a Christian, the way you live your life will be the loudest sermon people will hear. I have preached sermons that have been easily forgotten and ignored. But I'm here to tell you that a sermon preached from a life is probably the loudest and best sermons of all. You and I are living in a deal of time of dry bones. The question I'm asking you today is, what is your life preaching today? Is it teaching love? Is it teaching the redemption of Jesus Christ? Because this world so desperately needs to hear that right now, more than it probably has in many years. And the good news is, my friends, you can now unbuckle your seatbelts. We live in a time that God has blessed us to be a great light to this world when it's in total darkness. I challenge you, my friends, let your lives live as such sermons that the world says, I need to know how that person can have peace in such a time as this. What a wonderful gift we can have for this world if we simply give it to them. And with that, we shall go into our open worship.